But doing the same things over and over again tend to not lead to innovation. It leads to efficiency, but it doesn't lead to innovation.
Power to Live More with Jo Dodds.
Welcome to the Power to Live More podcast, all about productivity, organisation, well-being, energy and resilience. I'm Jo Dodds, and I started this show to enable interesting people to share their stories about how they use their power to live more, and by that I mean to do the stuff that they want to do more than the stuff that they need to or should do. It's about creating a life for yourself where you have the energy, health and space to be happy and fulfilled, spending your time as you'd like, whether that be at work, home or somewhere else entirely. That's your choice.
Hello. My name is Ellie Dodds and I'm co-presenter, and today Jo's interviewing Grace Marshall. Grace and Jo met many years ago at a Carrie Wilkerson event and have loosely kept in touch through social media since. Author of the award-winning How to Be Really Productive, Grace is known for her refreshingly human approach to productivity. Featured in The Guardian, Forbes and Huffington Post, her work as a productivity ninja with global productivity training company Think Productive has helped thousands of people to replace stress, overwhelm and frustration with success, sanity and satisfaction. Her new book, Struggle, The Surprising Truth, Beauty and Opportunity Hidden in Life's Shittier Moments, is out now. Back to the studio.
Today I'm interviewing Grace Marshall. Welcome, Grace. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me, Jo.
So it's lovely for us to reconnect. We spent ages chatting before we've come on, haven't we? Because we met many moons ago and we haven't really ever spoken since.
No, that's it. We've had about 10 years to catch up on.
Exactly. But we were saying how there's so many, I think back to that time and there were so many people that I met then that I still am in touch with now. But most of what we know about each other is, friends of friends or something we see the other person doing, or a webinar, or in your case, a book that you've published or whatever. And we do keep up, don't we? We just don't do it verbally or face to face.
Yeah, sort of indirectly.
Yeah, exactly. Sort of like distant cousins or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
So let's get started with you telling us who you are, what you do, and crucially, where you do it.
So my name's Grace Marshall. I'm a productivity ninja with Think Productive. So those of you who are familiar with the show, I know that Jo interviewed Graham Alcott, who founded Think Productive a couple of years ago. So I work as part of his team, which basically means I go and deliver training workshops and speak at things like conferences and staff away days, that sort of thing, on productivity. I also do my own coaching, so I run my own coaching business, and I write books. So I've got 3 books. The first was 21 Ways to Manage the Stuff That Sucks Up Your Time. The second was called How to Be Really Productive. And the third one that's just come out is Struggle, The Surprising Truth, Beauty and Opportunity Hidden in Life's Shittier Moments.
I love that the titles are getting longer and longer.
Oh, do you know, writing short titles is just not my strength at all.
And where do you do that?
So I'm based at home. So I do that at home. I'm in my conservatory where there's a lot of light. It gets a bit hot sometimes, and in the summer there's bees and all sorts that come into the room. But it's a really nice space, and that's in Stafford, in the middle of the UK. But then when I am delivering face-to-face, a lot of the training workshops, when there isn't a pandemic, I would typically be jumping on a train, traveling around the place to deliver those face-to-face with people.
Lovely. So it's interesting, or not surprising, that you should say productivity is your thing when you've just told me that you not only work as an associate, or however you'd call it, for another organisation, you also do your own coaching and you've written 3 books. So we shouldn't be surprised that productivity is your thing. But tell us how you got to where you got to, because you just revealed to me before we started speaking on here that you didn't think productivity was your thing at all back in the day. So where did all this come from?
Yeah, so I started off coaching. Well, when I very first started coaching, I could coach anybody on anything, which is true from a coaching perspective, but rubbish from a marketing perspective. So I ended up working mainly with people who were juggling business and family, and I was in the same position. So let's see, my kids are now 12 and 15. My business is 13, so it's officially a teenager. And so a lot of the biggest challenges faced by all of my clients was too much to do, not enough time, how do I fit it all in? And I'm naturally disorganized, so I wouldn't have picked time management as my thing. So I resisted it a lot. But we were just chatting actually at the event that we met at. One of the big questions I was wrestling with was, well, what are my clients' biggest challenges? And the top one was always time. So I just got to a point where I thought, you know what, Grace, just answer the question. Like, if it helps, then keep doing it. If it doesn't, then do something else. So so I kind of put my I'm not qualified and my imposter syndrome to one side and thought, right, let's just give it a go. And actually, I think what happened was, because I'm naturally disorganized, because I maybe don't come from a traditional time management perspective, I think I brought something fresh to the conversation. And I think I talked about productivity in a way that a lot of other people went, oh, that's so relatable. Yeah. And like the first 2 pages of my first book, people would often go, have you been inside my head? Because that's exactly how it feels.
Yes. I think it's commendable that you threw yourself into something that was not what you thought was your forte, to help your clients even better. That's almost the PR thing, isn't it? That you were so concerned for their biggest issue that you got over your own self, your own issue with it, and here we are. So how did that then play out? Because it's really interesting to say, I was quite disorganized. I didn't think that was my thing at all, but it made it easier to, I suppose, to get into their heads, as you say, and help them, because it was a different, fresh perspective. Where did you start with that? Because you can imagine somebody sitting down going, yeah, well, I'm disorganized. Now what?
Yeah, so I think for me it was it was a combination of things. It was noticing like what's happening and what's getting in the way. And because for me and for a lot of my clients, the reason why those kind of traditional time management things didn't work was because none of us worked 9 to 5 in an office with a PA, and with that kind of everything in nice neat boxes. Yeah. So we were snatching 30 minutes in between school runs and nap times and things like that. And a lot of it I realized was about energy management, not time management, because when you're running your own business and raising a family, you're knackered. So, a lot of it was just like, how do I actually get that focus and that energy, even if I do have the time available? So what I realized was there was so much of it was to do with psychology, with mindset, with how we think about work, how we think about time. And that's the stuff that I geek out on. So I ended up kind of approaching it more from a psychology perspective, I guess, rather than a sort of structured organization perspective.
Yes, yeah. Why do you think sort of time management came from such a weird place? Because, most people who talk about productivity now do talk about managing energy and attention and focus and the things that you've just mentioned. And yet, I'm thinking back to when I was in corporate and I did time management training and things. It was much more sort of process focused. And I guess some of it, as you say, was having potential to delegate and all the things that you can't do when you're a one-man band until you learn how to outsource.
Yep.
But yeah, it might be an unanswerable question, but it just feels like so much of the sort of traditional discussion around time management is about tasks and writing lists and things, but actually the solution is what you're teaching, which is the energy and the focus and something completely different to what everyone expects.
Yeah, I don't know if it's to do with sort of the way, I don't know, maybe there's a little bit of a parallel between the way kind of management theory and topics have been discussed. Sort of back in the day, the more scientific, rigorous kind of approach tended to get more airtime, didn't it? So things that we can measure, things we can manage, and kind of box together and schedule, that seemed to get more prominence compared to maybe some of the things that are talked about more now around things like resilience and emotional intelligence and or the kind of what they call soft skills. I wonder if also it's a bit of a throwback from the industrial age. Because if you think of manufacturing processes, then time management does work. Because there's a strong correlation between the time you put in and the outputs that you get out. Whereas now, actually, the value of what we create depends a lot more on the quality of our attention rather than the quantity of the time we throw at it.
Yes, yeah. And I think the point that you made about us not having sort of 9 to 5 opportunities to run our businesses, or wanting to do it even in that way, is relevant too. I mean, I remember when I first started my business thinking that's what I should be doing. That's what businesses do, isn't it? And then eventually, through years of experience and transition and confidence, I think, in a big way, I came to realize that I can do what I like when I like. I can run business how I want, funny enough, as long as it serves the customer, sort of thing. And that's
exactly
part of it, as well as you say, the industrial age corporate hangover, I suppose, for us home-based business owners.
Yeah, definitely.
And throwing the children in as well, I suppose, that generally in your corporate situation, the children don't come and knock on your door halfway through, or at home. What am I talking about? They don't even knock, do they?
Exactly. Yeah, they don't sort of video bomb your calls. No.
They maybe have done in the last year. I think my daughter always makes me laugh in the fact that she sort of sneaks in. I can hear the door like gradually opening, or a little cough outside the door, trying to get, is she listening to somebody or is she actually speaking?
Yeah. Same here. Like my daughter's really shy, so she's like, if she can see that the camera's on, she's like, oh, you're talking to somebody. But now she's figured out how to kind of go around so that the camera doesn't catch her. So now you can hear her but not see her.
I need to suss that with my husband. I quite often end up walking around in my pajamas still for half the day, because you can. And he's moved his office round, so now I walk in with a cup of tea and I'm right in front of the camera, and I keep forgetting. So I'm sure his colleagues have seen me in my pajamas.
Yeah.
But again, listeners to the podcast will know that the postman has laughed at my pajamas in the past as well. You see, that's one of the advantages that people have discovered in the last year, that being comfy at home works quite well.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I had I did my first gig in shoes for over a year yesterday, and it was still a virtual event, but it was being live streamed, so I was in a studio, and I posted a picture on LinkedIn, and somebody commented saying, do you think we can make slippers like an accepted business practice or corporate wear when we go back to working in the office?
Yeah. It's funny also how habits and things that you don't realize. So a friend of mine posted on Facebook today that she'd got some really comfortable slippers. She's just had a baby, so she's probably even more grateful for them. And she'd gone to register the baby and she looked down to find she'd still got the slippers on, and they weren't like subtle ones that look a bit like shoes. They really were looking like slippers, because she'd got obviously so used to them. And I ended up having to invest in a whole load of new socks recently, because I spent the last year wearing any old socks because I never went anywhere with them, so it didn't matter what they looked like, whether they matched what I was wearing or anything. And then I realized that I was having to like go out to get Ellie from school, and I was putting my socks into my black shoes, and so I'd have like a black trousers, bright red or patterned socks, and black shoes, and they look really rubbish. So I had to go and invest in black socks to wear normally in case I needed to dash out the door, which I hadn't thought about for like a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So funny how you sort of don't think about these things. I don't know. So you talked about coaching, when you first started your business 13 years ago, but you didn't always coach. And, most of us in coaching, when we first started out, those of us that are a little bit older, coaching wasn't really a thing, and it certainly wasn't something that we sort of aspired to do.
Mm.
And I know in your most recent book, you talk about your corporate career before you had your children and sort of came into the coaching world. Where did coaching come from for you, having not done that originally?
Yeah, so I mean, I was working in marketing, and it was a very tiny team. So there was the marketing director, there was me. It was a small kind of up and coming startup, and basically there was nowhere to hide in that business. So it was kind of a classic startup environment full of high overachievers. And I was very much a sort of straight A student background, can-do attitude, like you just work harder. And I just kept hitting my head against a wall of going, I can do stuff. If you tell me what to do, I'll do it. But what they wanted was for me to take more initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, taking initiative looked like me basically mind reading. And of all the things I'm good at doing, mind reading is not one of them. So every time I did something, they were like, why did you do that, Grace? I'd be like, because I thought you wanted me to. And so I ended up going to what I thought was going to be a training session on better decision making, and it turned out to be a conversation with a coach. So that was my introduction to coaching. And instead of being told how to do my job better, I was being asked questions about, well, what gets the best out of you? And when are you confident to take initiative? And when are you full of ideas? And I realized, gosh, I'm in the wrong place.
Right.
So the environment I was in wasn't, yes, I could do the job, but it wasn't getting the best out of me. And therefore I wasn't giving them the best of me. And so I had this kind of what I now affectionately call my midlife crisis in my mid-20s. Get it over and done with early. And so I made two decisions. So one was to leave that job, and the other one was to start a family.
Like you do.
As you do, I know. And so then I went through an even bigger identity crisis when I had Oliver, my first child, and the whole kind of going into parenting, and for someone with a straight A perfectionist background as me to go into parenting and not have a job and go, who am I? That was a massive identity crisis. But what came out of that was this whole kind of reckoning of like, well, who am I and what do I want to do, and what's kind of, I think what got that started was it got me just looking for that spark of, oh no, this is what I enjoy doing, and this is what feels good. This is what I feel like I want to throw myself into and take risks on, and and yes, I might not know how to do it, but it feels right. And so I started looking for that, and I looked at a few different areas and explored a few different things, but I kept coming back to coaching because. And it was a friend of mine who spotted it actually when we were chatting. He said, you keep talking about coaching. And this is from like one coaching conversation that I'd been on the receiving end of, and and what a difference that had made to me. And he said, you're actually really good at listening. Have you looked into whether you could go and do coaching as a thing? And I was like, no, I haven't got 25 years experience in some high flying career to impart advice on other people. But yeah, I guess what he said left a bit of an earworm with me, and I just kept thinking about it. And so I thought, okay, I'll look into it.
Yeah.
And I basically realized that coaching isn't about being the expert. It's about allowing other people to be the expert in their lives. And that really appealed to me. So I ended up doing a distance learning coaching qualification when Oliver was little. So kind of when he was a baby, I did my coaching qualification. I did 2. And then, as you say, nobody hired coaches back then as so you can apply for a job as a coach. So then I had to start my own business. And ironically, I now do marketing every day of my life.
Yes. Yeah, we think we're running away from those things, but they done, don't they? Yeah, it's interesting the whole sort of coaching, thinking that people are telling you, or that as a coach you have to tell people what to do, sort of thing. But it's actually about helping other people to come to to their own decisions, sort of thing. Because it sometimes is a bit of a myth that people think that you have to know stuff because that's what you're going to be doing. But it's also quite scary then as a coach, because you have to go into meetings where you don't actually know what's going to happen at the end, do you?
Yes.
Or in the middle, for that matter.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's scary. But then actually, when you get over the scariness, there's something very freeing about it, because your job isn't to have the answers. So if your job isn't to have the answers, it actually frees you up to just get really curious and to go where the conversation goes, because you don't have to control the conversation.
No, exactly. So what do days look like for you? You're balancing, as we've said, sort of three things in terms of activity, and I'm sure people listening to a productivity ninja are keen to find out how you manage to do that, get everything done, still be a parent, a wife, and all those other things.
Yeah. So for me, as you can imagine, being naturally disorganized, I tend to bulk against having like everything very I know some people love having color-coded diaries and having like Monday is this kind of day, Tuesday is something else, and I've tried it and it doesn't work for me. It does work for some people, but it doesn't work for me. So what I tend to do is I tend to go for rhythm rather than balance. So balance to me feels like everything needs to be an accounting act and it all has to be very exact, whereas rhythm feels like I can have busy periods. I can go fast and then I can go slow. I can have like full-on days, but also then have days when I don't do much and I can recover my energy. So it's kind of like riding the energy wave, if you like. So some days and some weeks can be quite intense, where I am traveling. Well, back in the days when I could travel, it'd be traveling, delivering workshops, doing emails and admin and stuff like that on the train. And then coming back home, and my desk-based days would be a couple of things. It would be the sort of sales, inquiries, account management type stuff. It would be the coaching. So the coaching I've always done virtual. And then sometimes it would be the writing as well. And then now it's kind of all changed a little bit. So now what I've noticed is that the delivery, so the workshop deliveries, are kind of just a shorter period of time, because I don't have to factor in the travel time. So I still need to factor in a bit of prep time and a bit of downtime afterwards, but I can quite easily talk to a couple of coaching clients on the same day that I'm delivering a 90-minute session, because I'm not having to jump on a train for 2 hours to get to London and 2 hours to get back. So there's a little bit more of a mix in the day, but I think for me it's making sure that I've got the energy to do it. So I tend to do a weekly review where I kind of look ahead and go, what does the landscape look like, and where do I need to either block out time for the sort of deep focus work and the writing, but also where do I need to block out time so that I don't have another call booked in, because I'm at capacity with how many people I can talk to coherently and still offer value in that day.
Yes, yeah. And talk about the writing process, because many people want to write a book and don't even start it. Some people start and don't get anywhere near finishing it. You've published so far 3 books, and I'm interested as well in that you said that was a sort of a part of your work. You're an author. You didn't say, in the past I wrote a book sort of thing, which is what some people do. They write the book. What do they call it? Their Magnus Corp? No, what's the word? I can't remember the word. The culmination of their life, and they wrote their book, and that's it. Job done. Tick that box. Move on.
Yeah.
You sound like you've probably got more books inside you, and you do sort of identify as an author as part of your work.
Yeah, I think for me, writing is how I make sense of the world. So it's how I make connections, how I get ideas. So when it's actually a really nice kind of model that I picked up from Amanda Palmer, who is she's a musician and artist. She wrote a book called The Art of Asking, and she talks about the creative cycle being basically you have collecting, connecting and sharing. So collecting is where you're collecting your materials, your ideas. Connecting is where you're joining your materials together to make something new, or you're connecting the dots and coming up with new ideas. And then sharing is where you go out and share it with the world. And I think I'm a natural sharer. So a lot of my work, like the speaking, the delivering, the coaching, all of that is sharing. But writing is really that connecting piece that I do. So sometimes it comes from a conversation that I'm having with a workshop delegate or with a client, and they ask me a question that I go, oh, good question. Not quite sure how to answer that. And then it will sit with me. And it's a bit like, we were talking about open loops before we started recording. It's a bit like that for me. It kind of just stays with me. And then that tends to be what sparks an idea that I want to explore by writing. And it's in the writing process that I clarify the idea and I kind of articulate it and give thought to it and go, right, that's where it sits in the great scheme of things. So that will sometimes turn into a blog post or a newsletter. But if there's a sort of a bigger idea, then it can sometimes end up turning into a book. And that's what happened with the latest one with Struggle.
Yes. So tell us more about Struggle. Remind me of the subtitle for it again.
So the surprising truth, beauty, and opportunity hidden in life's shittier moments.
Love that. And I love the fact that it's so like down to earth. Do you think I have to beat that bit out? I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I didn't ask you actually before we started recording how you feel about swearing.
That doesn't feel that sweary to me, but I don't know what Apple Podcast would say. But anyway, so where did it come from and what does it mean?
So it came from something that I was noticing in my productivity work. So in the world of productivity, the words I'm struggling are usually seen as the opposite of being productive. So when people are saying to me, I'm struggling, Grace, usually it means give me a fix, give me something to get me out of this struggle.
Yeah.
But what I also noticed, particularly with my coaching clients, was sometimes the places where we struggle, nothing's wrong. Sometimes it's actually the place where we do our best work. And the reason why we're struggling with it is because it's new, or it is difficult, or it's the more important work, or we really care about it. And so there was this kind of almost a taboo around struggle that I noticed that was actually getting in the way of us being able to show up and be present in the middle of it, and to be able to kind of see it as, oh gosh, okay, this is the work. It's not a sign that I've failed or that I've gone wrong, but this is like actually where I need to pay attention and where my attention needs to be right now.
Yeah.
And that kind of got me on a journey of exploring different aspects of struggle. So the book goes through looking at, when things go wrong. So when there's a crisis, for example, like a pandemic, or like when I had my midlife crisis in my mid-20s. Or what about when we make mistakes, when we get it wrong, and kind of our relationship with that, and then right the way through to like when nothing's wrong, it's just hard. And actually the fact that if we think something's wrong, then we're far more likely to either procrastinate on it, and kind of get, oh no, maybe that's not for me, or we end up kind of almost overworking and trying to hustle our way through, and maybe not stopping and not recognizing that, do you know what, this work, it just takes a bit more out of us. And then we kind of beat ourselves up and go, well, what's wrong with me that I can't cope with this?
Yeah. So we were saying before we came on about, you see, as I said at the beginning, we spent a lot of time talking before we started recording this. We've referred back to it so many times. We were talking about, all the sorts of opportunities for further exploring the concepts of the book. And one of the things that I was saying was, from my experience in sort of corporate situations, there's lots of discussion about, you've got to fail to succeed, and, keep failing and then you'll succeed. And you've got to make mistakes in order to learn. And there's all of that sort of narrative all the time. But that's really easy as a narrative, not quite so easy as a real life thing. And we were laughing about, if your children make a mistake, you sort of want to go, well done, you made a mistake, you can learn from it, when really you're screaming at them, what did you do that for? What did you think was going to happen? The reality of dealing with these situations where there's struggle is sometimes, much different to how we might speak about them. Imagine that they might go, when you're in the thick of it, it's different, isn't it? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, and I think there's two things on that. One, it's kind of part nature, part nurture. So there's something very inherent in us that is resistant to making mistakes, and particularly the kind of mistakes that make other people think less of us. So when it comes to our fight and flight stress response, that's designed to keep us alive, and it's designed to kick in when there's a life-threatening thing happening. So if I don't know, if a tiger escapes from the zoo and is running down the street at you, the fight and flight instinct is basically going, right, do I fight this thing or do I run away? How do I make myself safe?
Yeah.
But it also has a bit of a hangover, probably from I don't know, like caveman days, when we all lived in villages and tribes, and we actually depended a lot on each other in order to survive. So it's like, I can't fight that tiger on my own, but if I can run to where my people are, we can maybe fight it together. And so in those days, being rejected from the tribe was a life-threatening situation because we just couldn't survive on our own. And so I think that's often the reason why a social threat or a threat to our identity or our reputation in some ways almost feels the same to the limbic brain, so the part of the brain that's responsible for that fight and flight instinct.
Yeah.
It will treat a social threat exactly the same as a physical threat.
Mm-hmm.
And so when it comes to making mistakes, we often associate making mistakes with looking bad, looking a fool, getting into trouble. People are going to think less of us, they're going to trust us less, all of those things, which affects our social standing.
Yes.
And so there's a kind of an instinctive knee-jerk reaction that is a fear-based reaction against making mistakes. So that's probably why we as parents go, no, what did you do that for? Because we're worried about what that means for our kids. But probably, I don't know about you, but for me, I'm also worried about what that means for how I look as a parent, that my child has gone and done that.
Yes, yeah. And it's we can look back on situations and go, there was an issue there and I failed and it didn't work, and then I did that instead, and then in the end it came good, and hindsight and reporting on something. I mean, I was just thinking to myself, Edison is always quoted, isn't he, as being the person who did however many experiments that failed before he invented the light bulb. And you think at the time he probably wasn't going, oh no, that's another one, it's fine, if I keep going it'll work in the end, and then I'll be able to look back at it and people will talk about it for hundreds of years. He was probably like really fed up thinking it wasn't going to work, and that he was on a fool's errand and everything else. There were probably moments where he felt positive because he obviously did push through and keep going, but we sort of hold it up as the the example of why we should fail and everything else. But I bet at the time he wasn't enjoying it any more than we do.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, he definitely would have had frustration as part of that experience. But the really interesting thing about that example is we often hold it up as almost an example of perseverance. So it's like, if you try enough times, you will eventually get there. So take enough wrong turns, you'll eventually get the right turn. But I think there's also something really interesting about struggle, in that sometimes the wrong turn is right where the magic is. So if you look at other examples of innovation, like the Post-it note, that came about when somebody was trying to create a super strong adhesive for the aircraft industry, and what he created by accident was a weak adhesive that they didn't actually find a use for quite some time. It was several years later. He had a colleague who was trying to find something to keep a bookmark stuck to a hymn book, because he kept losing his page in the hymn book, and then went, oh, maybe this kind of adhesive could work with it. And he got this old bit of paper that was kind of going yellow, and that's where the canary yellow of the Post-it note came from. But there's something about, I mean, we all often pay lip service to innovation, to go, yeah, we need to think outside the box and we need to think creatively. But our brains also prefer the familiar. So we tend to stick to, that's why we like routines. And that's why I like efficiency. It's like, I can actually do something even better or faster. And if I can kind of hone it well and do the same things over and over again. But doing the same things over and over again tend to not lead to innovation, at least efficiency, but it doesn't lead to innovation. Whereas often it's not until that conventional route is broken, either by accident or just by an obstacle, and then we go, okay, so like, classic case with the training that I do, we do brilliant face-to-face workshops. They're super practical. Yeah, we do half-day sessions where we actually walk around from computer to computer and help people get their inboxes to zero. So we've always gone, we're a face-to-face training company. Like that's how we do our best work. And then of course the pandemic hit.
Yes.
And it's like, oh, now we've got to figure out, how do we help people in the virtual world?
Yeah.
And now we're doing all our stuff virtually. And looking ahead, even when we can go back to doing things physically, I don't think we'll go fully back to face-to-face, because there are some benefits to doing things virtually as well.
Yeah.
But and we did do like short webinars and things like that before COVID, but there was definitely certain things where we went, oh no, that's too hard to try. But when you have to, that's when we tend to go there.
Yeah.
So I think there's something in, to go back to your original question about like companies, I think there's something in how do we create an environment in the day-to-day where when mistakes happen or when the unexpected happen, yes, there will be that instant like frustration and this is not, this isn't working, but can we create some space within that, as well as just how do we fix this or do it better next time? Can we create some space in that to go, oh, let's just get curious about this. Like, what happened there? So what happened, not from oh my goodness, how did you, why did you think that was a good idea? Like, so, but what happened with a sense of curiosity rather than judgment?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that's sometimes when we can start to get, oh, do you know what? That's what caused that mistake, or that process is really convoluted. No wonder somebody would make a mistake there.
Yeah.
Or like, oh, I didn't realize that that's what our clients really wanted, because we always thought it was this, but actually we've discovered it's that.
Yeah. I think curiosity is just such a good I don't know what you'd call it, thing to have, to hold, to keep sort of there, available at all times. As you say, it really sets the right tone for moving into something useful and maybe different and so on, as you say.
Yeah, in the book I talk about curiosity being the antidote to fear. So how we tend to look at struggle is with that lens of fear. It's like, this is wrong, or it's not safe, I need to get away, I need to either fight it or fix it or get out. But curiosity gets us to pay attention to it, because fear basically gets us to go, how do I either avoid this or get rid of it? So it's always a kind of a looking away thing. It's like, I don't want to look at this, I want this to go away. Whereas curiosity invites you to look. So fear kind of says danger, keep out, and curiosity goes, ooh, that's interesting, let's take a closer look.
Yes, I like that. I was thinking what you're talking about, your midlife crisis. Going back to talking about coaching, I think it's interesting. I'm amazed some companies still use coaching, because it's so often that people end up leaving once they've had coaching. That certainly happened in my career. They one particular company put in a real in-depth personal coaching sort of scenario that people could take advantage of, and like something like half the people in the company left after they discovered themselves, sort of thing, which is I guess always a potential whatever. But I think one of the times when people have, as we've said, sort of those shittier moments, and often they turn out to be a positive thing, is when somebody's been made redundant, or they get dismissed for a reason or whatever, and are forced into making a different decision, and often it's a real positive change. I mean, I certainly think back to me, my last corporate role, I'd gone back to work for a company that I'd worked for before, and I had a bullying boss, which at the time I didn't really do much about. Well, I did go and complain to her boss, but clearly he did nothing about it. And I ended up compromised out of the organisation, i.e. they paid me off and I had to keep quiet, and they paid me much more than they were supposed to do, so for legal reasons, which always I think gives away. And then the same woman who'd basically got rid of me got rid of herself 3 months later, and it turns out they'd been planning to do that for quite a while. So I think I was just collateral damage. But I left there planning to never work as an employee ever again. And it's worked out. But I went to work interim because I wanted to have the power so that I could choose whether to carry on working somewhere, and if there was an issue like I'd just experienced, I could then go and find another interim role rather than stay in that one. And then I got more confident, I guess, about how, in fact, I tell a lie, I did end up as an employee again after that, but for different reasons. But after that, I started my business, and that was 15 years ago. And one of the reasons I don't think I'd ever would have started a business for many years was that fear thing that you talk about. I wanted security, and I was worried about lacking security, and I think that pushed me into realizing that what I had, even though it looked like it was secure, actually wasn't secure at all, and actually was horrible. And it was because it was somebody else that was calling the shots, and so I had to be the one that was going to do that and have things in my control. And I think there's many situations where people talk about the fact that they, as I say, were made redundant, or they lost their job for one reason or another, and actually it was a massive turning point in their life.
Absolutely. Because I think quite often people are stuck in jobs where they go, well, it's not great, but it's not bad enough that I want to leave yet. And so it's like, it's that kind of compromise that we make. And yes, sometimes totally understand sometimes the reasons why we might do that. And sometimes it might be kind of, jobs might be limited on choices, and we've got bills to pay and all of that kind of stuff. But I think there is something about, if we compromise too long, there's a part of you that dies basically inside, isn't there? And also from the company's perspective, if you've got a whole lot of people who are not actually that engaged because they're not in the right place, then that's not great either. I remember actually talking to my coach at the point where I realized in the session, I was like, I think my answer to your next that question that he just asked me was, I think what I might need to do is leave, but I'm feeling conflicted now because you're being paid by them. And he was like, no, my job is to help you figure out where you need to be. And if you're not in the right place, then you leaving is good for you and good for them, because it frees up the space for somebody else to come along that does fit the role. And I just wonder how often that happens, in that we stick to the familiar because there's a sense of security and familiarity to it. It's like, better the devil I know kind of thing. Whereas, like you say, when you've been pushed, or when you've been forced to kind of go there, you realize you then have to entertain. It's like, was it necessity is the mother of all invention, is that you've got the necessity of like having to find a different route, but then also you realize, oh, I didn't die. And the world didn't end. And so I think then it gives you a bit more of a boldness, and like you say, that kind of thing of like, well, I can choose, and actually I want to hold the power of choosing and not feel like that choice is being made by somebody else.
Absolutely. You just reminded me, actually, I was listening to a really good podcast this week, The Diary of a CEO, which I've mentioned on many occasions, and he was interviewing somebody who's called, I think, Professor Green, who I got Ellie to look up because we were driving at the time. I think he's a former rapper, because he talked about being in the music industry.
Oh, wow.
But now he's obviously got a PhD and all that sort of stuff. And he was talking about quite a difficult childhood and so on. But he made the comment, and again, regular listeners will know I can never remember quotes. I can never remember the actual sort of succinct, pithy way of putting anything, but I can remember the intention behind it. And he said something which reminded me of that thing about, and you've just mentioned it a bit as well. All those other days where it was really shitty, I got through them. I'm here because whatever I thought was going to happen, that would be terrible, didn't. Otherwise it wouldn't happen anymore, sort of thing. And it just reminded me, and something you just said then reminded me of that too. And I suppose isn't that the beauty of being older and having the wisdom to know that I've gone through so many shitty scenarios and I've got through them that I'm quite resourceful and able to do so, is how you end up feeling as you get older and older.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing I go to when when I go back to me as a parent and my child does something, I go, oh, what did you do that for? I'm like, oh, no, this is how they learn. And I think back to some of the stuff that I did as a kid, and probably later on, actually. It was probably after I left home and when I went to uni. Those were my real learning years, because I had a bit of a sheltered upbringing. So when I was really out on my own, then it was like some of the stuff that I did, I'm quite glad my parents didn't know about, actually, because they probably would have had a heart attack and go, what did you do? How? Why did you think that'd be a good idea? But that was how I learned.
Yeah.
And so that often, remembering that reminds me when I'm in that parenting situation to go, okay, so yeah. The coaching that being a coach, I think, helps for me, because I can always fall back on my coaching to ask questions rather than go, no, you should have done this. And then it'll be like, okay, so what were you thinking? And it's like, oh, I see. Okay. Oh, so what do you think about that now? But like, the sense of humor in me is kept alive by knowing, this is how they learn.
I'm just going to not let Ellie go anywhere. She's not going to go to university or go out or enjoy anything with her friends or, do anything. I'm just going to lock her in the house. If she's anything like me. No, not at all. Not at all. But again, regular listeners will know that she's encouraged to be independent. But yeah, sometimes you just wish that you could just lock them in the cupboard and not have them exposed to any of those difficult scenarios.
But I think also, like, societally, we tend to prize getting it right, don't we? We're like kind of right the way from school, where the point is to hit the A's and to get the answer right and to get 100% on the test or whatever it is. That's what we tend to celebrate, is like having all the answers, and so I think we create this environment in our culture where we think the point is to be perfect or have the right answers, rather than the journey of learning, where you develop the ability to create the solutions and to explore and find answers.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think sometimes in situations, many people struggle with saying, I don't know, I'll find out, or I don't know, does anyone else know, sort of thing. And certainly, I mean, again, thinking back to corporate thing, the whole leadership thing, that we often in this society expect the leaders to know everything and not admit that they don't, and that can be quite damaging, can't it?
Absolutely. And particularly at the moment, when uncertainty is the new normal, when there's so much going on, then actually, if you think about it, what we need are leaders who are willing to say, I don't know, because if that's the truthful answer, rather than ones who feel like they have to come up with something to sound certain. And by sounding certain, actually, they're kind of digging themselves into the ground and taking everyone else with them, because then there's no room for maneuver. There's no room for like, okay, we're still discovering and things might change. So I think, I don't know and I've changed my mind are two really powerful things that we need to hear more often from our leaders.
Yeah, and without wishing it to get political, that's what I said during the time of the pandemic, that every time anything was changed, it became a U-turn, and the papers did a whole big thing about no one can make a decision, and then when they do, they change their mind. And it's like, well, actually, I wanted them to be flexible to the data and be able to change their mind if it was the right thing to do, but apparently not if you're reporting in the media. But there we go.
Exactly.
So just to turn things very practical before I go into the last couple of questions of the show, as a productivity ninja, I feel I would be remiss not to ask you about tools and apps and tips for productivity. So, what's your top three of any of those things?
Okay, so tools wise, so I use Todoist, which I know you do as well. So yeah, that's my second brain. That's where I store everything that needs to be done at some point. And that's absolutely brilliant, because I had baby brain before I had babies, so I can't remember things. So being able to dump it all in there and then organize it is an absolute lifesaver. I also use Trello for collaborating with a couple of members of my team. So I have I've got the Think Productive team, and that's kind of part of the Think Productive organization. But in terms of my own business, I've got a couple of members of my team who work with me on like my social media and kind of graphics and things like that. So so we use Trello to collaborate on that, and the reason why I use Trello for that is just because it's so visual. So we can see like, here's what we've got coming up, and we can put ideas in the bucket, and then we can move them around. And then my designer can add stuff for approval, and we can go, right, yeah, that's ready to be scheduled, like, and go for that. So so I use that. So that's 2 tools. What's my third tool? I'm going to go with the calendar.
I knew you were going
calendar. The basics, but actually that's absolutely my go-to on that. Definitely. And
just a few tips. You talked about working with people around inbox zero. It's something that I talk about quite a lot. I bet some of the people that come to your courses are probably like, what? And some of our mutual connections have admitted to one of my podcast guests, 22,000 emails in her inbox. But she still does operate inbox zero because she knows what's in her inbox. She doesn't lose things. But inbox zero with 22,000 emails in there, obviously.
Email is such an interesting beast, I think. Lots of different ways of dealing with it. Some people take a fishing approach, so it's like, as long as I can go and fish for what I need, I will just leave the rest of it in the stream. And I can understand that. I tend to find, for me, ages ago I was speaking to somebody who was a personal organizer, so like kind of physical decluttering was what they did. And she said that clutter is basically unmade decisions.
Yes.
And I know that if I leave things in the inbox, that's exactly what it is. I haven't made a decision about what I want to do there. And if I leave it in there, I will keep seeing it, and I'll keep coming back to it, and I'll be scrolling up and down going, should have done that. Should I look at this right now? And it just kind of completely steals my attention. So so for me, it's like kind of reduce the amount of times you make a decision about the email. Is essentially what's behind the inbox zero technique.
Yes. And it's interesting you say that, because that's something that I've been thinking about in the last couple of weeks in terms of my Todoist tasks, because a lot of the tasks that end up on my Todoist list are forwarded from my email. And I used to lazily just forward them and then, file them in the relevant project and filter them and all that sort of stuff. But then I realized recently that some of the reasons that I was procrastinating on certain tasks was because, and it's effectively what you've just said, and I hadn't sort of thought about it in that way, but I'd have to make a decision about what the task was before I actually did it, because the title means nothing, and I have to click through the email, work out what I'm supposed to be doing, etc., etc. So I've made a real conscious effort in the last couple of weeks to rewrite all my, or not all of them, but a lot of my tasks to be absolutely clear in terms of what needs to be done, the next action sort of concept, to stop me avoiding looking at the things that I don't really know what they're all about yet, because I haven't looked close enough, because I haven't bothered to do that.
Exactly. And that's so often the case when we're procrastinating, isn't it? It's like, no, I haven't actually figured out what the next step is. That's why I'm not doing it. And once I've figured out the next step, actually, it's really easy.
Absolutely. And I just realized exactly that my tasks don't look like next steps, even though they are, but they don't, because I have to go in and work out what they are before I start them. So I tend to just scan past them, think I'll come back to that one later because it looks too hard, and it's not, as you say. Interesting. Lovely. So last couple of questions then, Grace. Firstly, what about those days where it all goes horribly wrong? How do you deal with those?
So I'm going to do more swearing here. I'm going to go to my, what I call the 3 shits process in the book. So the first is oh shit, which is that just recognizing like, okay, something's happened, something's gone wrong, or this is painful, or this is hard. And to go back to like kind of why that matters is because it helps us to override or helps us to notice, I think, that fight and flight instinct. And by noticing it, we can then bring the rest of our human brain back online, which is then when I go to the second shit, which is, what is this shit? And that's when we activate curiosity. So, and it might not be straight away. So I might need a bit of processing time. I might need to walk away. I might need to just give myself a break to get back into a better place, depending on how much it's affected me, before I come and do the curiosity thing. But then just to go like, what happened there? And quite a few times now, when something has gone wrong, particularly in my business, and or I've just had like I don't know, a really bad inquiry call, I'm like, what the heck happened? When I can get myself into a place of curiosity and start looking at it, I'll often notice something that I can then use to refine my processes, or refine my business, or my positioning, or my messaging, or something like that. So there's always a gem I can take from that.
Yeah.
And that's what I call the holy shit moment. It's that revelation, it's that truth, opportunity or beauty, basically, that I write about in the book. And then it's that whole thing of, so I talk about finding the treasure, and how where we keep our treasure is often not where we found it. So where we tend to keep treasure is like, you imagine in a beautiful museum, and it's clean and it's good lighting and it's all been polished. But where we tend to find treasure is like in the caves, in the dirt, and in those moments of struggle. So when things go wrong, days when things go wrong, and this might not happen all in one day, but that's kind of the process that I try and go through.
Yes, yeah. I love all those titles.
It's memorable.
It almost makes it feel, not so bad thinking about that.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's also really helpful in struggle as well, that humor. Whenever you can bring humor or laughter into a situation, it does help to diffuse something.
Yes, yeah. And then the last question is, what about those days where you get to live more? And that's where I say that you get to do more of the things that you want to do and less of the stuff that you don't want to do. What do those days look like for you?
I think for me, it usually involves a good conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So whether that's, if it's work, it's a light bulb moment conversation. It's the kind of conversations that go deeper than the everyday, or you kind of get somebody thinking differently about their situation.
Mm-hmm.
So a good geek out conversation, definitely. And if it's not work related, equally, conversations with friends, with family, reading a good book. Love a good book, good food. Good book, good food, and good company, probably.
Sounds blissful. That's brilliant. Thank you, Grace. I've really enjoyed talking to you today. Tell people how they can find out more about you and get in touch.
So you can find out more about me at gracemarshall.com, and you can find me in all the usual social media places. So I'm Grace Marshall on Twitter, Grace Marshall Ninja on Instagram, because I didn't get there quick enough to get just my name, and you'll be able to find me on Facebook and LinkedIn if you search for Grace Marshall Productivity Ninja, probably.
Yeah, productivity ninja is quite sort of distinctive, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Grace. Thanks for your time today.
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks, Jo.
Stop feeling stuck and overwhelmed. Join Power to Live More Calm membership today and make an investment in your future. The Power to Live More Calm membership is designed for coaches and consultants struggling with the pressures of running a home-based business. You get access to our supportive community, including weekly Zoom calls, accountability, learning materials teaching you online marketing, audience building, income generation, and all sorts of other things you need to run your home-based business with ease, along with materials like templates, checklists, and planners to keep you motivated, organised, and productive. To learn more about the Power to Live More Calm membership programme and apply, visit powertolivemore.com/getcalm.
All this information is available in the show notes in the app that you're listening to this podcast on, or on the website if you go to powertolivemore.com / in this case 222. And this week we're still continuing with our back to school gentle challenge. You can still join it if you go to powertolivemore.com / back to school. And this week we're talking about processes and how you can improve what you do and how you do things to really create great quality work most effectively and most efficiently. So we covered things like the first day we talked about mise en place from the catering world, and then we have been looking at things like decluttering some of your domains and subscriptions and things like that. We're talking also about to-do lists and prioritizing and so on. So this week is all about processes, and then we're moving into the final week next week where we're going to be talking about automation. As I said, if you'd like to join us, it's powertolivemore.com/back to school, and you'll join in as we are, and you'll be able to get to the previous posts with all the tasks that were set during the first few weeks from there. Again, the show notes for this week's show are at powertolivemore.com/222, and we look forward to speaking to you next week.
Use your power to live more.